Hello, welcome to English 123, Week 1. All right, so we're going to be talking about works cited and reference pages and citing sources, finding sources, really, uh, time management, those specific things that really are important in the first week, right off the bat. You wouldn't think that a works cited or an APA reference page would really matter all too much in the beginning. You really think it comes at the end of the paper. Why is it at the beginning of the course? Well, really, that is the foundation of your paper. The sources are really what your paper is based on. It's the evidence. It's the credibility that your written essay is being built on. So if that foundation is weak, the argument is weak, the essay is weak, it's easier, makes it easier for someone to dismiss or disregard what the ultimate argument of the thesis is. One could maybe say, okay, you pose a good point, but this individual, this researcher or PhD, whomever, scholar that you've cited, they're not very credible. That research that you've done, that particular source that you've included, it hasn't been accepted. It's not looked at as being something of sound research. And there's ways that the academy, the overarching larger community of universities, uh, this criteria that they've established over the last few hundred years, as far as determining what is sound research. Some may disagree, some may not, but it's really what really builds the academy, builds scholarship. Um, so we want to kind of talk about that. So keep that in mind. Your works cited, though it's the last thing on your essay, it's the foundation. And there are some professors, and keep this in mind, there's some professors who will go straight to the works cited reference page and look through that first to see what research you've done. You might think that this works cited or reference page is just kind of an obscure, coded page of sources that no one really looks at. But you'll be surprised as you get through into some of your maybe upper division, some of your major courses, you may possibly come across a professor that is very particular about that works cited and what is included in that works cited and how it's represented in your overall body of your essay or argument or research. So that's something to keep in mind. It's a very important part of your research because ultimately, if it's missing, if you were to turn in an essay research paper without a works cited, there's no credibility for that essay or research paper. It can ultimately be rejected as an assignment. It's incomplete. So don't make the mistake of not including a reference page or works cited, even potentially on some of the smallest assignments in the future. Very small essays. Anytime you quote something, you want to document it. You want to provide that evidence of where you found it and how someone might go retrieve that to, identify or to verify what you've included in your essay. So that's what it is. It is evidence. It is showing I have done the research. I have read through legitimate, credible scholars that have produced legitimate, credible work, and that's what I'm basing my argument on. Not hearsay, not just some random information out there, but this is information that has been specifically written for scholarly academic purposes. And that's key. That's really important to understand. So let's talk about maybe the different types of sources, or some of the different types. We have scholarly, non-scholarly. We'll just break it into two for right now, but those are the main two. Well, what's non-scholarly? We'll start with that. Well, non-scholarly is really sources that are free for the most part, anything on the internet, anything that's a .com, any kind of news website, any kind of blog, any kind of information that's being written for consumption, for common, general mass population consumption, is not scholarly, necessarily credible research in terms of the academy. Now, there might be a blogger, there might be a journalist that you like, there may be an independent journalist, there may be a particular news agency that you really rely upon for information, but really, for academic purposes, it's not enough. It's not enough just to go by, you know, a journalist that has credibility in his journalistic field alone. Now, these things can be included in anecdotally or for illustration purposes or examples, but they really don't provide absolute evidence for what we're working on, okay? So I know that can be a little confusing, and I know it can cause problems and frustration, but really news information, .com information, .org information, Wikipedia, any of these types of information that's out there is not considered scholarly, okay? So what's considered scholarly? Well, scholarly sources are sources that are published by known, reputable academic institutions. For instance, Harvard University. For instance, Oxford University. For instance, University of California. Some of these particular research institutions have their own press. Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, Stanford University Press, University of Chicago. These types of research universities are known for producing scholarly work that is credible and reliable. Well, how is it determined to be credible and reliable? Well, typically they have committees that work in correlation with the scholar, the writer, as an editing team, a readership, as you may call it, a focus group, possibly you may call it that. It's usually a committee of maybe 3 or 4, 5, possibly more, depending on the nature of the research. A group of PhD professors that are grouped together to read and to critique and to scrutinize everything that this particular writer is writing in their research. So if you have some kind of medical research going on, you're going to have a committee set up for some kind of accountability. And so then anything that's been written about the research or being written about the studies that are being done, it's going to be submitted to this committee. And this committee is going to review this, and they're either going to approve it or they're going to reject it based on specific criteria and maybe send it back to the author or authors to make corrections. That's very common. This is how master's thesis are very simplified version would be a master's thesis committee. Maybe a PhD committee would be a little more complex, and then beyond that would be more fully funded research that is being endorsed by the university with a full-scale committee. So that's really what happened. It's called peer-reviewed, P-E-E-R, reviewed research. So that's really what determines scholarly, credible research. So that's what we want to look for. We want to look for articles and books that are published by known research universities and their publishing departments or publishing companies that they've set up, peer-reviewed articles in journals for academic journals that you'll find in the library, that you'll find through the databases. So we're looking at books and journals and scholarly articles that are all verified and deemed credible for the academy, for the use of the academy. Okay. So that's the two camps that you're looking at, and there can be a mix to a degree. You want to lean heavier on the scholarly, of course. You want a ratio, for your 10 sources of this paper, you want at least 8 of them to be solid scholarly sources. And then you can use 2, maybe, perhaps, that are maybe more solid journalistic papers, perhaps. And you can go beyond the 10 and you can add anything else, perhaps maybe from like, Newsweek, Time Magazine, something like that that's more anecdotal. It's just giving you an example of some kind of issue that may have come up in the media. Okay, so blogs and such, not so much. There's not as much credibility there. Of course, things on Facebook or on Twitter, there is room to cite that, but again, it's more examples rather than actual solid evidence, because that's really what you're building here. You're building a body of evidence to support your specific claim or argument. Okay, so that's the difference between credible and non-credible. It really comes down to an academic committee, a peer-reviewed committee that approves that particular publication. Okay, so moving on from that, what's the difference between MLA and APA? Well, it's really for 2 different disciplines. MLA is really only used for English or English literature publication. It's not common outside of that. It'd be very rare to see that, I think, outside of the literature review, literature criticism. It has to do with English literature or modern languages, really. MLA, Modern Language Association. So, research that's being done in the languages, in translation or in English, either way, is going to be pertaining to MLA. APA, however, is more geared toward the sciences. It is particularly geared towards the psychology majors. It was developed for the psychology majors, but it can be within sciences, within nursing, within the medical field. And there are, different stipulations within your major that you may have for APA if you're within the sciences. So those are the 2. There's others. There's Travian, Chicago. There's just the basic footnote system that can be used. There's others out there. However, it really comes down to the 2 basic, being MLA and APA. Okay, so they're used in 2 different ways. MLA is more geared towards and favors more direct quoting. There is paraphrasing and summarization and that sort of thing, but it really does favor, to a degree, I would say, over APA, direct quotes, more heavily driven by direct quotes. Whereas APA, not so much. APA is more looking at the data rather than the narrative, rather than exact quotes. It's looking more at the paraphrasing, the summary. It's more scientific driven rather than philosophically driven. So there's more of a focus on paraphrasing and summarization. So, but then again, with APA, there is direct quotes being used that can be used, but it is limited. If you look through and if you dig into the manual, if you dig into the specific guidelines, it does limit how much of the paper should be made up of direct quotes. And it's just because of the way that the information is presented, the direct quoting would become a little more bogged down in the paper, a little more laborious for that particular discipline in the sciences. Okay, so now one thing that needs to be really addressed is time management with this. When you're doing research, when you're going through the databases, when you're looking through and trying to find what information you need to support your argument or to develop your argument, you want to always be aware of time. Because these databases, the library itself, is really a vacuum of time. It will deplete your time so quickly. Time will go. I mean, it's a process, so it can. Wow, I've been sitting here for an hour and I don't have anything. Or it seems like I've been here for an hour and I've only been here for 10 minutes. Or I've only been sitting down trying to research this for such a short amount of time and it seems like it's taking forever. So it can seem kind of tedious at times, but in the long run, in my experience and what I've observed from other students, is that there tends to be more of a demand for time with research. You seem to never have enough time. to research. There always seems to be more research that needs to be done, or more articles that needs to be read, more time to look over and to critically analyze what you've read. So there's always that vacuum of time that's taking place during the research process. So you really want to balance that out. You really don't want to sit down and read through an entire 30-page journal article um, if it doesn't apply to exactly what you're wanting to argue and what you're wanting to pursue. So be mindful of the synopses that are provided. Be mindful of the summaries that are provided uh, for these research articles and journal articles. They will help you tremendously and really find the main idea of the article that you're going to be reading. And if you don't see it correlating, move on to something else. So we'll definitely discuss more about the databases and how to navigate those. But yes, be very mindful of time. And that's going to really be a theme for the whole course. Time management in drafting, time management in editing. But it really seems like time management is so much more crucial in the research portion because it can just slip away really easily. So those are the main things I wanted to bring up about Works Cited, reference pages, MLA, APA, credible sources, scholarly sources. So if you have any questions, again, as I said before, as I'll continue to say, always email me, let me know what questions you may have, and looking forward to this first assignment. All right, well, again, thank you for your time, and have a great day, a great night. Thank you.